Okay, so my name is Apollon Ivankovic. For those of you who don't know me, just going to go through some product directions for MacroView. It's a bit of what we've done this year, last year, and what we're planning to do in the coming year. With MacroView Studio version 2, we're a bit actually disappointed with our progress in the last year. We had just simply too busy to keep progressing at the rate we'd like to, and we also had a few issues with a third-party component vendor in terms of rolling faults. So you get one version of the component, and the component's used within MacroView Studio, and to get that fixed, and then another one pops up in another area. It's sort of like a rolling fault thingo, and the end result was that it was difficult to make Studio version 2 releases. But regardless of that, we've added VNC functionality to the product. VNC stands for Virtual Network Computing. It's basically a graphic terminal that leverages X windows but sits on top of it to transmit bitmaps across the network. And that has a number of advantages in low bandwidth scenarios, and it's also fairly simple to implement when compared to implementing an X server. Okay, so I might just start now by demoing it so you get an idea of what it is before I go into the details of the connection screen. Starting up MacroView Studio. And now there's a menu option, VNC Connect, and it brings up a connection screen, and it's got 3 tabs: Display, Programs, and the General tab. The first one is a session name, and if I double click on that, it brings up a list of previously defined sessions and then loads them. The password's entered once, and it's loaded when you select the session. And then I connect to a server. Now, in this actual environment here, this one machine, as a matter of interest, is running VMware server package, which allows it to run other operating systems embedded within the same machine. And it's running a Linux server as well as the Windows machine. So I'm actually connecting up to that Linux server on this box. In this scenario, it just saves us having a reliance on the network connectivity from a demo situation. But you could use this sort of thing on site, one, for testing. If you don't want to have to set up another machine for testing, you can have a virtual server running, install a test scenario, and play with it before putting it on your live site rather than having a separate machine. VMware have free packages now. If you're interested, you can talk to me during the break about virtual computing. So that's a VNC session. It's a tab within MacroView Studio, and just run in edit mode. And this is the package that Tony used to connect to Wongwon Hills over a slow link. The CSPP have been running with a Java VNC implementation that runs in the browser for some time. This VNC implementation is all .NET code and implemented from scratch as part of the MacroView functionality. And we did it from scratch rather than using open source software, so that we give a bit more flexibility in what we can do with it, where we can deploy it, etc. So in this example, let me go to the next page, recovery, and I'll open the recovery graphic. So now it's connecting to the meta server on the MacroView system, then downloading that file locally and putting it into memory. And so now I've got both a VNC session as a tab and a graphics editing environment. So let's just change that to a different color and save it. And I've got this running in EasyEng mode, and just refresh to get the color change. So you've got VNC sessions within your MacroView Studio environment. you can edit metascripts, browse databases, modify graphics, while being connected to multiple MacroView servers. Let me think. Okay, so that pretty much covers a quick overview of the VNC functionality. I'll just go through the login screen that you saw when I started that up. Every VNC login has a session name, and then you can specify the server or the IP address of your destination, a username and a password. That checkbox on the bottom that says connect to VNC server directly, that's if you wanted to... VNC by default, you have to actually run it. So you have to type xVNC on the server and then you connect to it. That's a real pain for setup. So what we've done in MetaServer is extended the functionality so it has a VNC login feature. And so when the login screen connects to a system, it actually connects via the MetaServer port, not the VNC port. It tells MetaServer it needs a VNC service running. MetaServer then turns into a VNC session, and then the VNC protocol takes over from there. The beauty of that is that you just set up MetaServer on your system, make sure xVNC is in the path, and you're good to go. Rather than the standard VNC functionality is a bit more involved. And then you can define the desktop size in terms of the number of pixels and the color depth. The existing Java VNC functionality we're using on a number of sites has a limit of 256 colors. We've removed that limit by implementing our own functionality. And in addition, for every session, you can specify what programs to run once you've connected. So this example, it sets... I just did an echo display for debugging reasons. Sets the background color to grey, starts up the Motif window manager, and then runs an Xterm. You can run any X application on this startup, say an XOps3 session to take up the whole screen, or a full window manager desktop if you wanted to. That's all defined in this connection string. You can also pass server parameters to the VNC server. On the right hand side you've got -fp Unix blah blah blah, and that's just setting some specifics for this particular VNC server that needed a specific font path. Typically that's blank, but I set this up on Fedora Core 5, and the VNC server was a bit different to what I was used to, so I just had to add those settings. Okay, as I mentioned, it's MetaServer does all the xVNC initialization to make deployment a lot simpler. It specifies client startup. The implementation is totally .NET. What that means is part of the .NET functionality is a security level aspect, that you can run .NET within a sandbox. By sandbox, I mean that the program doesn't have direct access to disk unless the operating system decides it can have access, and the advantage of that is that you can then run it with fewer permissions. For example, embedding a .NET control within a web page, the level, it can do things like display graphics but not display a pop-up because the sandbox won't let it. It can access isolated storage, which is a little portion of the disk that it's allowed to access, but it can't access any other files. So by implementing the VNC functionality in .NET, we've got that ability to put it into straight programs that run with unlimited access to your machine, or within a sandbox, in say a web browser, to have limited access to your machine. The implementation has a nice separation between the protocol and the graphics. So we can change the graphics implementation in future. The term WPF I've used on the slide stands for Windows Presentation Foundation. It's the replacement for the Windows Graphics API from this point forward. Microsoft is releasing Windows Vista and the new Office 2007, and in addition they're releasing .NET 3.0 with a new graphics implementation that's a bit more advanced than previous implementations, which have been based on an architecture that's been around for like 10 years. So this is a major change in architecture. And our VNC implementation has a nice separation between the protocol and the graphics, so we can grab out the graphics component and replace it as needed in the future. Interestingly enough, it leverages what's called the MacroView serialization framework. Serialization is a programming term, which is a design pattern, and it's interesting from the perspective that the same reusable code is used in all the modern drivers we've been developing, the meta server implementation, this VNC implementation. So we've been building a base to work off of in a variety of communication areas. So the work we've done in the drivers, the original PCC driver was leveraged for meta server. That same work was also leveraged for the VNC implementation. We can embed application level messages into the VNC protocol, and we use that to allow communication between a VNC session and the local client to do additional functionality. I'll show you that in a second. It's easiest to describe by actually demonstrating it. Okay. MacroView Studio is used by engineers and developers to set up a system and maintain it. Another side of the coin for Windows users is actually just using the MacroView system without having to or needing to configure it, and that's where this new product called MacroView Windows Desktop comes in. It's intended to be the user interface for MacroView on Windows. It's designed primarily for non-operation staff, but it can be used by operations. But it's mainly for people, engineering, production staff, management, that need access to the system in an easy-to-use fashion, but want it on their Windows machine, not on a Linux server or a SCO server. It's built around a modular architecture, so there's 4 modules that are included by default, but we can develop additional modules and just plug them in, or you can develop your own modules, say similar to what you've done with ADO.NET. Say you've got an application in ADO.NET that does some task. You can implement the module interface, and then this will be able to load it and display it as a tab within the system. And then you can link between modules. So you click on a button in XOps 3 and start up your module to do some specific task. And because of that, it's an integration point for the XOps 3 graphics, given that they're running on Unix and Windows graphics. It's an integration point to link the two, so that the whole user experience is more integrated than if you had to separately run Windows programs all the time as a separate exercise with multiple clicks. It's also an extension point for leveraging .NET on Windows functionality. You can do a lot in Linux, but some things are just not available in terms of API. For example, this is just an example. Say you've got a SAP system and you want to interface to it. There's .NET APIs that make life easier to get data from SAP or put data into it. And there's a lot of components and software libraries available in .NET that you can leverage and integrate with MacroView from the server all the way through to the PC. It's Click Once deployable. Click Once is a technology for sort of mixing the metaphor in terms of web deployment and a Windows application. It allows you to go to a web page, click on a link to a program and have that program be installed without having admin rights, and then for that program to be available from then on. I'll show you a bit more on that later in the presentation. Okay, one of the 4 modules that comes standard in MacroView Windows Desktop is the VNC module, and let's show you that. I'm going to start up a MacroView Windows Desktop session, and I'm going to start up a VNC connection similar to what I just did with MacroView Studio. Now, so this is the VNC module. If I go to the About box, it lists all the modules that are installed. So these are the 4 standard ones: a report viewer, a data table viewer, a web browser, and this is an example of a custom module developed. Now, I've set up a page already that shows a bit of the integration between the MacroView Windows desktop and any modules that you have installed within and XOps 3. So actually I might just, I'll keep going with this. The example of the browser module, I've got a button here. Actually, I'll just restart this with Easy Engine enabled. Whoops. Press the wrong button. The reason I want Easy Engine enabled so I can show you the metascript that provides the integration. So if I start up Easy Engine on this, have a look at the text button and look at the activate script. There's a metascript line that basically sends a message to the desktop, and that's indicated by the desktop prefix, and then there's a full stop and then a module name. So this sends a message from the metascript on the XOps 3 through the VNC protocol to MacroView Windows desktop. The VNC module gets it, and then it looks for other modules that are installed and sends the message to the module, and that does some task. So in this case, it asks the browser module to display a web page. So if I click on that, it displays a web page that was linked in there. So the reason you want to do this is, one, to have a contextual link between a MacroView graphic and some information on the web or the intranet, or a contextual link from a MacroView graphic to a web-based application. Say you have something in IT, I don't know, parts, spares, anything that you want to have quick access from a graphic, maybe even provide additional parameters when you provide the link. So in this example, the next button I've got here, all I've done is sent a Google search request with specifying these parameters. And you can do the same for any of your intranet web applications. If you have a web application that can get to a particular page by passing it parameters, and the metascript can provide the context based on what that graphic needs to see, it provides a good level of integration. Actually, these are just hard-coded, but you could put metascript variables in there. And same sort of deal. So now the parameters have been passed. Now, the browser implementation is quite restrictive. We haven't got back buttons or an address bar, and that's the first implementation. We'll probably stick to that unless people request more. But the advantage of this is that you have a tight, limited ability for what the user can do, and that may or may not be good in certain scenarios. In the case of operators, you may only want them to look at certain web pages. But we'll see how it goes. If someone has a request to have more browser functionality in here, we can add it, address bars, etc. But at least with the minimal approach, you can disable the normal browser on a machine via IT level definitions, and limit what other browser pages you can go via the links provided. Okay, so another module is the data grid module, and the data grid module takes messages of this type. You basically can define a server, say the local host, define a database file, a DBF file, and send it to the data grid module on the desktop, and it will display that database within a tab. So I'll just do that with the entities database. So now it's received that message, send it to the desktop. Desktop's received that, then requested from MetaServer, give me this database file. MetaServer's got that, came back with all the database rows and displayed them. I showed this in last year's MacroView users group in the context of MacroView Studio, This is within an end user environment rather than an engineer's. So it's got things like grouping, sorting, that sort of functionality. And there's a few different databases. I won't run those again.
You can add and delete records in there, or just view? Or?
No, at this stage, this is another thing I mentioned last year as something we'd aim for, but we just didn't have the time to be able to do it. But that's the goal. At this stage, it's just read only. It'll make a lot of difference if it was readable and writable, but we only have so many pairs of hands and brains to handle the task. So another module is the reporting module. So the reporting module is the viewer side of the reporting editor that's in MacroView Studio. And that's part of the reason why we haven't really pushed MacroView Studio over the last year as far as the report's concerned, is because there was no easy way for getting the report results out to large numbers of users. It was purely a MacroView Studio thing. Now this is part of the end user experience. So when I click that button, oops, there we go. It sent a host name and a report file to the report viewer module, and the report viewer module then received that report file, requested received the report file name, asked the server for the report file, downloaded it, got the report file, analysed it, requested from the server all the data it needed, got the data back, and then rendered the report. So there's a lot going in that sequence. I won't go through the report functionality, but it's what you see is what you get sort of reports. It's got charts. It's oriented towards tabular data primarily, so any tabular data like trends, table variables, database files, views can be received and presented in a what you see, what you get fashion. Oh yeah, and it's also got things like double page displays, printing, search for a particular piece of text, a typical report viewer type functionality. Just run one more. Oh, did you see down the bottom? It's got the number of records. Did you notice that? That's the number of database rows it got from the server to produce this report. Okay, so I might just flip back to the slides for now. I went a bit further on than the slides. The VNC module, as I mentioned, is the same application code as for MacroView Studio, so it's the same code base, just embedded within a Windows desktop environment. It's implemented as a desktop module. Just quickly run through the message passing syntax. So it's basically send message to desktop dot the module name. And the message format, in its most general form, is a host name. And the advantage of that is that you can use like one VNC session as like a menu system for large numbers of MacroView systems. So if, say you have, I don't know, in Doug's backup case, say that you have that Linux server, which is the main backup for all the servers, you could have a menu page on a VNC system there that lists all the servers, and you click on that and brings up a VNC session and then connects to the actual live server. Or run a report on the live server, or run a report on a particular macro. So that host prefix allows other hosts to be referenced. Then a file name on that host, then a sequence of variable value pairs, similar to the way HTML takes variables in their query, the address bar queries. And the names of those variables are module specific. So you may want to, if you develop your own module, you can specify additional variables to change that module's behavior based on what the metascript is asking that module to do. And there's a few examples that I covered in the demo. The web browser module also has the ability to do the same message processing functionality. We've taken the hyperlink syntax and used it in a non-standard way. But the advantage of that is that you could have a browser page on an intranet which sends these same messages to modules to do the same task, but using the browser as a menu rather than a VNC session as a menu. Those pages, those hyperlinks wouldn't work in, say, Internet Explorer or Firefox because they're used in a non-standard way, but they do work within the MacroView Windows desktop environment. Okay, I covered the browser module. I think I covered most of these things. Just a note, if you have an ASP.NET implementation for your intranet, say you've got applications written using ASP.NET, you can still use MacroView ADO.NET to have your web application extract data from the MacroView servers, historical data, whatever. So you can mix and match browser applications with XOps3 applications with your own developed modules to have an integrated experience for your users in accessing MacroView data from multiple servers and accessing IT information all from one UI if you choose to. We'll actually probably extend the API for the Windows desktop. At the moment it's all a tabbed browsing metaphor, so the module windows appear in tabs. Possibilities including adding a task pane, so your modules can have a series of tasks and define the task pane that way. Another possibility is to extend it to have, when it minimises, it stays in the little tray to the right and pops up, well, they call it toast. You know, when you have Windows Messenger or anything like that and you get a new message, a little window appears. They call that toast because it looks like a piece of toast popping up. But I don't know, say for what's CSPP do for the emissions and wind speed and that sort of thing?
You have daily reports.
Well, say there's a scenario where you want everyone to know when something occurs, whether you're emitting something and the wind is at this speed,
the highest cyanide level,
or something like that.
Did you get
audible alarms.
just the audible alarms as such?
There's just showing as an example of what you could do extending the Windows desktop functionality. Is it one possibility is have a tray and have a pop-up toast for important messages for any users that run the package on a continuous basis.
Alarms?
At this stage, it's all via XOps3.
But you could do it
Yes.
by alarms, yeah?
Yeah, but
So alarm could
this is all... The beauty of what we're doing with MacroView Windows Desktop is that we've got XOps3 graphics. They were built quite, in terms of implementation, quite a while ago. The technology is quite different, and we're using this as a stepping stone. You know, every year we're going to add new functionality and slowly morph the graphics from the historical implementation of MacroView to both the historical implementation and the newer technology. This is just one step in that process. As I mentioned, the browser pages can generate the desktop messages as well and act as a menu. The data grid module I've covered. As I mentioned, it's read-only currently, with a long-term view of making it be able to edit dbase files within the Windows environment. The report viewer, also covered already. Okay, custom modules. The beauty of custom modules is that we can leverage the power of .NET and all the... Because Windows is such high volume, a lot of developers and component vendors produce product for it. So it has its problems, but also has its advantages. And one of the advantages is to be able to leverage the third-party components in a number of different areas. New graphics functionality, communications to devices and systems that aren't easily available on Unix systems or very expensive. .NET as a development environment is very developer efficient. And our opinion is that compared to implementing a web-based approach, it's a bigger bang for the buck in terms of development, whether it's our development maintaining a MacroView as a package or your development creating specific software for your site or company. And so custom modules is basically, if you create a Windows form within Visual Studio, which is Microsoft's development package. You just have to implement that interface that's shown on the screen. Basically a series of properties to identify the module, version numbers, the ability to have help for that module defined and show it, to process desktop messages received from other modules. Apart from all that, once a module's implemented that interface, it then can be anything an existing .NET Windows application can do, but integrated within the MacroView Windows desktop environment. I showed you the About box, which lists the modules that are loaded, and the top one was a custom module I developed a couple of days ago. It took about 6 hours, and this illustrates the leverage you can get from components available for the .NET platform. So I'll just demo that. So that's the module that's loaded. It's called Virtual Earth. Microsoft have a web-based package that allows you to view maps, and they've added what they've called Virtual Earth 3D, which is to compete with Google's Google Earth product, which allows you to basically zoom around the world. And what I did was use that component software, built a MacroView Windows desktop module with a bit of a wrapper around it, and then modified this XOPS 3 screen to specify a position on the Earth, longitude, latitude and altitude, position of the camera and which way it's pointing, and then send a message to that module, which is called desktop.virtualearth, to go to that position. So now I'll just click on this button, which I just showed you the Metascript command for, and that one loads the module. Then hopefully it'll connect through. It did connect through the CSPP network. Requested Microsoft's map servers to go to a particular location. This actually looked a lot better on at a higher resolution, but I'll just zoom out a bit, and that's Doug's offices. I've got it flipped around, so I'm going to have to rotate it in 3D, and I've always found this difficult, especially on an angle like this, because I suppose that kids these days with 3D games will find this really easy, but I have to think. Okay, so there's an example of a map, and it's integrated within the same environment. Now, we could also take this functionality and extend the module so that it accessed MacroView ADI.NET information. Say you had an entity attribute which provided GPS coordinates for a series of trucks. Actually, in this scenario, it's probably better for utilities, where utilities have information spread across a wide area and they want status from various points, or technicians need to know how to get to places, or any information you can stick on a map. This is the sort of thing we can leverage. Now, the point of this demonstration is not about maps. The point of it is we have MacroView Windows Desktop, and we have an extension point to be able to easily improve the functionality on a per application basis. And this would have taken thousands of man days to develop, and we've leveraged it within 6 hours within a MacroView environment. And I've got another button which does the same sort of thing, sets a longitude and latitude to a different location on the Earth. I just thought this was pretty cool. So I'll click on it, and it zooms out, goes to that another location, and sets the camera there. Now I'll just let it get the data for a bit, and that's San Francisco basically on a 3D view. I think the performance of this is primarily limited by network connectivity, not the graphic speed. But you get the idea. So that's the power of developing your own custom modules. So we can develop them for you, or you can do it in-house. It's a similar sort of complexity to using ADO.NET. So if you've done an ADO.NET application, you'll be able to create custom modules. Okay, deployment. By default, it's basically a setup.exe, so you run on a machine, but that would require admin privileges. And so that, for small numbers of users, that's fine. But it's also click once deployable. So if you've got a large number of users, you'd want to use click once to install the main setup files on a server, or web server, and then have everyone click on that link once to install it. And after that, every time they run it, it'll check if there's a new version on the server and automatically deploy it. I'll show you that working. Now, we looked at how to implement that deployment functionality. At this stage, we're going to use Visual Studio Express rather than building our own deployment functionality. It's a possibility in the future, but since Visual Studio Express is free, anyone can download it, and it has all the deployment publishing functionality, it's just easier for this first version to use that functionality as is. I'll just demo that. Okay, let me find it. There it is. So Visual Studio Express is a development environment for Microsoft platforms, and if you wanted to use click once deployment on your site, at this stage you'd create a small solution within Visual Studio. We can do this for you, or you can get your IT department to do it. And I've created a simple application to act as a shell around MacroView Windows Desktop. So if I look at the main line for that program, it's basically that desktop shell form class is the core of MacroView Windows Desktop. All I've basically done is do a run and then added references to the desktop framework and MacroView Desktop, and that's basically it. I can do other stuff. Actually, I forgot to, that's not it. This is part of the demonstration. I'll comment that out for now. So now, within this scenario, let's have a look. That solution, you can define a publish location. So I'm going to FTP it to the FC5 server, and it'll then be available from a particular intranet site. In this case, it's the FC5 machine on the intranet. And here's the version of that particular application. That's 1.0.4. So it's like MacroView Windows Desktop for your company. And I chose to call this thing called Site Viewer. So you can name it whatever you want within your company. And you can define how the application is going to be updated. So this checkbox says the application should check for updates. And by default, it checks before the application starts. So when you click on the menu option, it checks if there's a new version on the server. Or you can do it after the application starts if you don't want to interrupt the user with that small, half a second check. Okay, now I'll just publish it. And it basically builds it and publishes it to a location. It'll ask me for the password once it's built it. So now it's building and publishing. Okay, it's doing a bit of work to do the publishing exercise. And this is the web page it creates. So you could create your own intranet web page, have logos for your company, and this is where where an end user installs the MacroView Windows Desktop from. And they only need to do this once, say when they first start up, or when the functionality is first installed, or when a new employee comes. And they don't have to be admin. Now, click once deployment is not going to be totally simple because of just the nature of IT. So it's not going to be as simple as this scenario we're showing here, because it's just complex. Anyone who's involved in managing large numbers of desktops can attest to it. But the advantage of it, once it's all set up, of the security that you want, updates to the software, if you change your modules or get a new version of MacroView Windows Desktop, click once will simplify things. So I'll just install it. So it's downloading it from the web server, installing on the local machine, and running it. So this is this is MacroView Windows Desktop, but the site viewer application that I've tailored. It's not the one that I installed using setup.exe. This is the one. Well, actually, I'll just show if I can get Task Manager. How do I get Task Manager off that? If I look through the process list, you know siteviewer.exe, and there's no MacroView Windows Desktop, so it's the tailored one for an organisation. And you can do all the stuff that I demonstrated. Note that you wouldn't be able to do that Virtual Earth custom module because actually that uses DirectX, which all the programs that are installed by click once are run in a limited security scenario. So they're restricted more than something installed by setup.exe. That's why you can install it as a non-admin. So it would fail if I tried to run the Virtual Earth stuff. And that's an example of where it's just complicated in terms of IT, making sure security permissions are correct, etc. Okay, so let's imagine that we did some development and created a new module or modified an existing module. And I did a bit of a naughty example of that by just automatically displaying a form. So I've changed the original program, say it's your module, and then I'll publish it again. I have to go through this build process again, and the password. Now it's sending the files to the web server via FTP. Thinking. And it brings up that web page. Now, rather than press it from this, because this is what an IT person or an engineer would do. Say you've done that, the person comes in next morning, runs Site Viewer, which is the system. It checks to see if there was an update and detected there was a new version published on the server. It asks whether they want to install it or not. They say OK. It downloads it from the server, installs it, and now you have the new version with that modification. And that modification was just simply automatically displaying this form for this example. So that's an example of click once deployment. So when you've got large numbers of users that use MacroView Windows Desktop, that's an option to simplify the maintenance and upkeep of the system. Okay. Change tack. We'll go on to XAML functionality.